talk a little bit about the Philippines and the situation there. Firstly, I want to ascertain my right to voice my opinion. This is the internet, and I'm doing this in the context of my own country. I'm well aware that some Filipinos will be offended by this video, but my channel, I cover issues all over the world, especially in my own country. But I do cover issues around the world, and I make no apology for that. I'm a citizen of the world, and I just say things as I see them. The thing about the Philippines is it went through the transition to democracy under Corazon Aquino, so this shouldn't be a case of being a closed nation and not being subject to outside scrutiny. Without outside scrutiny, countries would basically be able to do whatever they want. Now, there are some who say, because this is going to be quite a critical video. I'm going to be looking at the presidency of Rodrigo Duterte, and it's going to be very surface level. I'm not going to go very comprehensive and in depth. This is just an outsider's perception and opinions. Um, but I take the view that when you travel, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So if I was in the Philippines, of course I would respect the Philippines, and that applies to any country. But those who say that countries could do whatever they want, that is basically it's a nonsensical statement. When you really look at it, it is a stupid thing to say. Because under that logic, governments could do anything they want. They could torture their own citizens. They could commit genocide against their own citizens. They could do whatever they want. So to me, that is a nonsense statement that governments can do whatever they want. National laws should not trump international laws and international conventions on such issues as human rights. So, again, what I'm going to be talking about is only surface level, and I don't claim that I know all the details. This is just opinion. Rodrigo Duterte is obviously the new president of the Philippines. He's only been in office a few months, but he's a very controversial figure. Some Filipinos love him, some Filipinos hate him. That's my perception. And that seems to be vindicated because the comment I left about this yesterday on international news bulletins about this on Facebook, I got some hostile feedback from some nationalistic Filipinos who didn't like me criticizing the president. However, I also got a lot of supportive comments from other Filipinos who obviously agreed with what I was saying. So, my understanding is that Duterte was mayor of Davao City, and there was very high crime in that city. And as mayor, he really had a tough guy image, and he basically cleaned the city up. And his administration was seen as successful insofar as reducing crime. That's my understanding. So there's some comparisons here with Rudy Giuliani in New York City. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but there's some parallels. And let me be very clear at this point, as someone who has experienced crime, who's been driven by my home from gangs long time ago, but it had a profound experience on me. I'm no liberal when it comes to crime. So to any Filipinos watching this and saying that I'm kind of crying over criminals, it's nothing of the sort. I've contempt for gang lords and so on that make life a misery for people. These are selfish, in some cases sadistic individuals who absolutely need to face justice. So my concern about Duterte's approach has nothing to do with him being tough on crime. In fact, that would be very welcome. If I was a Filipino, I would probably want the president to be tough on crime. Because, like I say, this is a country that does have, it's a country that has suffered serious high crime levels. And for people, for ordinary people who are suffering from this, of course they want someone who's going to take charge and really not, take a hard line against people who are making lives a misery. But this is where the danger lies, and this is the area where I and many other people have concerns. The sort of language that Duterte has been using, Duterte, I'm not quite sure his name is pronounced, is quite dangerous. Now, it's too early to say if he's going to be another Ferdinand Marcos, but frankly, he is talking like a dictator. I mean, he's talking about cleaning up drug dealers, and international monitors have suggested as many as 1,700 people have been killed in the last 7 weeks. That is a very, very high figure. Um, and it's important to emphasize these are suspected drug dealers. Now, No doubt among them there is going to be gang lords that not many people are going to miss very much, who cause misery for a lot of people. But when you have a president using language like he's going to wipe people out and basically advocating extrajudicial killings, which every source I have seen suggests that that is what Duterte is doing, that is very dangerous. That's dictatorial. He's advocating no rule of law. Now, as soon as you get a president behaving this way, people might think, okay, well, he's being tough on criminals. But how then do you draw the line between one day he's tough on criminals, the next day he starts rounding up opposition? This is a dangerous path. And all I would say is, I'm not a Filipino citizen. I'm not telling people what to do, but I think people should be very concerned about this because Duterte is acting and talking like a dictator. Like I say, I have no problem with him being tough on crime, but I think you also have to be statesman-like and responsible. And some of the language this guy has been using makes Donald Trump look moderate. Um, the whole strongman image, I understand that gets votes, but you also have to be statesman-like. And frankly, if I was a Filipino, I'd be embarrassed by this guy. He's acting like Rambo, or he's not acting like a statesman. You have responsibility when you're in that position, and this is a man who's governing 110 million people, 100 million people. That's no light responsibility. And in my opinion, some of his rhetoric is reckless. Even if there is no extrajudicial killings going on, and it looks like there is strong evidence indicating that there is, it's irresponsible language. I also have I don't get a good vibe from this guy all round. I mean, when he joked about raping the missionary, this was a notorious incident where he said the mayor should be in the front of the queue for this gang rape. This is referring to a missionary. I forget which country she was from, but she was a Western missionary who was raped in 1989. That angered a lot of people. It angered women's rights groups in the Philippines. It angered a lot of outsiders. Now, he did apologize, but to me, that is not something you joke about. And to me, that really exposed this guy's mentality. Okay, he apologized, but only under pressure to do so. So that immediately, people make mistakes, but that is something you just don't joke about. And, it's not the first time that he has made those sort of controversial statements. So there will be some Filipinos who are very, very zealously in favor of him because they obviously want crime to be dealt with. And I'm not judging those people because I have felt deep anger and I've got some very conservative views on crime. So this is not about saying, oh, that's, when the thing is, though, talking about due process is not the same as saying let them off the hook. They can still face justice. Actually, Congressman Pacquiao, as he now is, said that when he was a senator, as I understand it, he had his his campaigns against the drug trade had led to arrests, but those arrests didn't need to involve deaths. So, unless I'm mistaken, I may be wrong about this, and like I say, I'm not an expert in Filipino politics. Pacquiao is in an opposition party, and he has suggested that it's not necessary to just be involved in mass killings. I mean, anyone who thinks this is going to solve the Philippines drug problem, I think that's naive. Look at what's happened in Mexico. 150,000 people dead in 10 years, which makes the drug war in Mexico actually one of the world's deadliest contemporary conflicts. So, whilst I totally understand that no one is going to cry over a drug lord, these guys are evil in some cases. I have no sympathy with them. But there's a big difference between a drug lord in a high position and a very low level, in some cases, kids who are being forced into this trade and maybe their families are being threatened. There's a lot of circumstances around this that makes me wary of Duterte's position of just, oh, we'll just go and wipe them out. I understand victims of crime wanting that approach, but this is a man with responsibility and it is downright dangerous. Um, So when the UN criticised this, Duterte is now threatening to pull out of the UN. Well, that's crazy. That's totally crazy. If he wants to isolate his country, like North Korea, then Philippine nationalistic Filipinos might welcome it now, but down the line, that's going to backfire. He's advocated getting a sort of which sounds to me like a Shanghai Cooperation Organization. He's advocated sort of a body involving China and African countries. That looks like just a snub to the UN and to Western countries, but it's going to backfire when you try to isolate your country in that way. It backfires, and I'm British. We may well find that with Brexit. I don't know. Too early to tell. But in my opinion, countries should not be isolating themselves on the world stage. And I think it is completely compatible. This is a very, very important point. I think it's completely compatible to have conservative views on issues like crime, to believe that criminals have to face justice, tough justice, whilst also believing in basic human rights, such as due process, such as a right to a fair trial. When you have a head of state advocating extrajudicial killings, as he seems to be doing, that to me is very dangerous, and people should be concerned about that. Because, like I say, one day it's criminals, the next day it's opposition figures. It's a very alarming path, and this is a serious situation because the Philippines is a major country, 100 million people. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm an outsider, but all I would say is do consider the things I'm saying. If you're offended by this video, well, so be it. You're entitled to disagree with me, and I'm not claiming I know everything. But this is the perception that outsiders have of your president, and I'm not the only one. Many, many people, including many Filipinos, feel this way. Um, Benigno Aquino, I know he wasn't that popular, but at least he was statesmanlike in the way he spoke. So was um, so was most other Filipino presidents I can think of. Um, Duterte is acting, he's taking on the gangsters, but he's acting like a gangster himself in the way he's speaking. And I've no problem with tough talking, but there's a big difference between tough talking and actually advocating extrajudicial killings. So all I'm saying is, yes, the Philippines is a sovereign state. Yes, they have a right to, manage their own country in that way, but they also have international obligations on human rights because those are international conventions. You can't just pick and choose issues like due process. And, like I said, I'd be very concerned because one day it's criminals, next day it's opposition figures. That's the way dictatorships go. And yes, he was democratically elected, but we'll see what happens. I hope I'm wrong, but personally, I've got concerns about this guy. And the reason, one final point, the reason I sort of held off from making this video is because I don't want people to think that I'm soft on crime. I'm not. If I was a Filipino, I would want, tough action on these guys. There has to be due process. If there's gun battles, okay, some of them are going to die. I understand that, but there's a big difference between a criminal dying in a shootout with police and a criminal simply being gunned down in their bed in a police raid. Big difference. Um, 1,700 people. That's a very, very high figure if it is accurate. So that's just my thoughts as an outsider. I'm not telling anyone what to do, but I will say this: countries have a right to sovereign laws, but no national laws in the world should trump international laws on issues like human rights. That's my opinion. You can agree or disagree, but I believe international laws are more important than sovereign national laws.